Welcome to the HB channel. My name is Hans Beekhuizen and in this show of my simple two-step approach to loudspeaker placement. If there's one thing that's mystified in the audio world, it's loudspeaker placement. That often has to do with a lack of understanding acoustics, or at least a lack of understanding acoustics in the living room. And then there are the dreaded standing waves that, like evil spirits of old cultures, are blamed for anything that goes wrong. Personally, I don't believe in spirits. Like Bob Ingersoll said in the 19th century, in nature there are neither rewards nor punishments. There are consequences. So, if we understand the consequences of our actions on how the sound travels to the room, we're good. That's quite doable for a large part of the audio spectrum. Only for the bass tones it's a lot harder, but don't worry, I know a perfect workaround for that. But let's start at the beginning. First we have to know the basic rules for loudspeaker placement, which are rather simple. The two loudspeakers have to be placed in such a way that the distance between the speakers is slightly less than the distance from each speaker to the listener. So, loudspeakers and listener are at the corners of an imaginary triangle of which two sides have equal length. Depending on the circumstances, the type of loudspeakers used and the personal preferences, the distance between the speakers will vary between 2 and 4 meters, where 2 meters is rather narrow and 4 meters is rather wide. The height of the mid and high speakers will normally be equal to the height of the ears of the listener at the listening position. Again, depending on the circumstances, the type of loudspeakers used and personal preferences, the loudspeakers might be aimed directly at the listener or further towed in or even towed out. As said, these are basic rules and just applying these rules will rarely be sufficient to get the best out of your stereo. Therefore, you will need to apply some tricks and psychoacoustics. In my approach to loudspeaker placement, I divide the audio spectrum into 3 parts. The first part, from 200 Hz downwards, is the area where our hearing responds to changes in pressure level. Above 600 Hz is the part where directional and localization information is perceived. The remaining 1.5 octave in between will be ignored by this approach. If you have the other two parts taken care of, the middle section should be good too. I will call the part below 200 Hz the lows and the part above 600 Hz the highs. If you want to search for the best place for a speaker, you will have to start with the low end, since these frequencies are the longest and will travel like ripples in the water, to all directions equal. When the sound source and the listener exchange positions, the influence on the lows will be identical. So, place one of your speakers on your listening position, play a piece of music that contains pulsating low frequencies like a plucked bass, and start listening to the low end only there where you would like to place your speakers. By moving your head on potential speaker positions while listening to the lows only, you can easily judge what's the best position for both left and right speaker. Of course, taking into account the isosceles triangle I mentioned before. Then, place the speakers on these spots and judge whether the low end is sounding fine now. If not, repeat this process until you're satisfied. The next step is taking care of the highs. This part of the frequency spectrum handles things like intelligibility, openness and stereo imaging. Find the first of the early reflections and find out how many milliseconds after the direct signal it arrives. To do this, you must first find the point on the wall where this first reflection occurs. We use simple tools, a mirror, a piece of string and an assistant. Go sit at the listening position and let the assistant keep a mirror flat against the left side wall, halfway between the speakers and the listening position. Now let the assistant scroll the mirror horizontally until from the listening position you see the left speaker in the mirror. Because the reflection of mid and high frequency sound is like that of light, that point on the wall is not only the place where the light of the speaker bounces off the mirror to the listener, but also where the sound from the speaker to the listener is bounced. Now mark that spot, for instance with a piece of masking tape or a post-it note, and grab the string. Tape it to the speaker and take it the other end to the listening position. Mark the string at the listening position, for example by a piece of masking tape. The next step is for the assistant to take the string in the middle and gently pull it to the marked position on the wall while you feed the string from the listening position. When the string hits the wall, mark the string again at the listening position with a piece of masking tape. If the distance between the two marks on the string is more than 1.7 meters, you're okay. What if the distance is less than 1.7 meters? Then we need to ensure that the early reflections are clearly lower in level than the direct sound. This can be done in two ways: scatter or attenuate. Again, you can compare it with light. Suppose at night you have a strong spotlight focused on a mirror that, at the listening position, shines you right in the face. If this is a problem, which it is likely, you can hang a dark curtain in front of the mirror. The problem will be solved because all the light is absorbed by the curtain. A disadvantage is that all the light gets lost, leaving you with a poorly lit room. A second possibility is to place an oddly shaped metal object at this place. The reflections from the object will be scattered, meaning you lose some light energy. The remaining light will be reflected in all directions with an irregular shape. That way there's less light loss than with the curtain, while you still clearly get less light coming your way. We can do the same with sound. You can hang a thick curtain at the first reflection point, preferably slightly off the wall. That will absorb a large part of the highs. There are also costly professional solutions, but they often lead to even more costly divorces. A very good solution is to place a bookcase at that place and fill it up only half with books. Such a bookcase is often 30 centimeters deep, and because it's half full, it has slots in which the sound becomes partially trapped, while the back of the books partially absorb and partially scatter the sound. In the 80s, I've also applied louvered doors and bamboo mats, but those are typical period solutions. Use your imagination, and if all else fails, you can always hang a tapestry. For experimentation purposes, try a step ladder at the reflection point with a sleeping bag or duvet hang over it. If the overall sound then becomes too matte or too dull, you know you ought to use scattering materials. Now there remains only one last thing: how to aim the speakers. The general belief is that the speakers should always be aimed directly at the listener. But this is not always the best solution, although it's difficult to say what is. That depends on the dispersion of the speakers and the acoustics of the room. Some speaker manufacturers offer good advice in the manual or on their site, but the best advice is to always experiment. If you like this show and want to see more, please subscribe to the YouTube channel and give us a thumb up. You can also help by telling others about the HB channel.